Chapter 18. How interesting it would be to write the story of the experiences in this life of a man who killed himself in his previous life, how he now stumbles against the very demands which had offered themselves before, until he arrives at the realization that he must fulfill those demands. The deeds of the preceding life give direction to the present life. Tolstoy. He felt the message sear itself into his soul. The living words pressed themselves forever into his being. As he rested after leaving his splattered body, we both pondered the different levels of meaning of these outwardly simpler words. The session had begun in the usual way. I regressed Pedro using a rapid induction, and he slipped quickly into a deeply tranquil state. His breathing became deep and even, and his muscles relaxed completely. His mind, focused by the hypnosis, penetrated the customary limits of space and time, and he remembered events that had happened far before his birth as Pedro. "I'm wearing brown shoes," he observed as he emerged in the physical confines of a previous incarnation. "They're old and battered. I'm a man around 40 years old," he added without my prodding. "Balding on the top with hair beginning to gray. My sideburns and beard are gray already. My beard is short, and it's shaved pretty far down my cheeks." He was paying considerable attention to minor details. I appreciated the accuracy of his description, but I was also aware of time slipping by. "Go ahead," I advised. "Find out what you're doing in this life. Go to the next significant event." "My glasses are small and wire-rimmed," he noted, still occupied with physical features. "My nose is wide, and my skin is very pale. It is not unusual for a hypnotized patient to be resistant to my suggestions. I have learned that you can't always guide the patient, sometimes the patient has to guide you." "What do you do in this life?" I asked. "I'm a doctor," he answered quickly, "a country doctor. I work very hard. The people are mostly poor, but I get by. They are good people overall. Do you know the name of the place where you live?" "I believe it is in this country, in Ohio." Quote. "Do you know the year?" "Late 1800s, I think." "And your name?" I delicately inquired. "Thomas. My name is Thomas. Do you have a last name?" "It starts with AD. Dixon or Diggins or something like that." "I don't feel well," he added. "What's wrong?" "I feel very sad. Very sad. I don't want to go on living." He had jumped ahead to a time of crisis. "What is making you so sad?" I inquired. "I have been despondent before," he clarified. "It comes and goes, but this is the worst. It's never been this bad before. The both things are just overwhelming. I can't go on this way." "What both things?" I echoed. "My patient died. The fever killed him. They trusted me to save him. They put their faith in me, and I couldn't. I've let them down. Now they have no husband, no father. They will have to struggle to survive. I couldn't save him." Sometimes patients die despite our best efforts. Especially in the 1800s, I added, paradoxically attempting to ease his guilt and despair over an event that had occurred a century ago. I could not alter the event, only his attitude toward it. I knew that Thomas had already experienced and acted upon his feelings. What was done. But I could still help Pedro, by helping him to understand, by helping him to see from a higher and more detached perspective. He was silent. I hoped that I had not jarred him from the doctor's lifetime by doing therapy aimed at a level of understanding beyond Thomas. I had not even found out the other event that had precipitated his depression. "What is the other thing causing your sadness?" I asked, trying to put the genie back into the bottle. "My wife has left me," he answered. I was relieved to be talking to Thomas again. "She has left you," I repeated, encouraging him to elaborate. "Yes," he answered sadly. "Our life was too difficult. We couldn't even have children. She went back to her family in Boston. I'm very ashamed. I couldn't help her. I couldn't make her happy. I did not even attempt therapy with his higher mind at this time. Instead, I asked Thomas to move ahead in time to the next important event in that life. We could do the therapy later, as he reviewed this life while still in the hypnotized state, or even later, after he emerged from the hypnosis. I have a gun, he explained. I'm going to shoot myself and end this misery. I suppressed the urge to ask him why he chose a gun and not one of the many medicines or poisons available to a doctor of that time. He had made his decision at least a century ago. The question itself was probably my way of intellectualizing his despair of such magnitude as to drive him to self-annihilation. What happens next? I asked instead. I've done it, he said simply. I've shot myself in the mouth, and now I can see my body. So much blood. So much blood. He had already left his body and was seeing it at a distance. How do you feel now? I asked. Confused. I'm still sad. I'm so tired, he answered. But I can't rest. Not yet. Someone is here for me. Who is there? I don't know. Someone very important. He has something to tell me. What does he tell you? That I have lived a good life, until the end. I should not have ended my life. Yet he seems to know I would do what I did. Is there more? I asked, pushing this paradox aside. The answer came directly at me now, in a more powerful voice. Was this Thomas, or Pedro, or someone else? I flashed back momentarily to the masters who spoke through Catherine. Except this was years later, and Catherine was not here. It is the reaching out with love to help another that is important, not the results. Reach out with love. That is all you need to do. Love one another. The results of reaching out with love are not the results you look for. Results to the physical body. You must heal the hearts of men. Both physicians, Thomas and I, were being addressed, and we both listened raptly as the message continued. The voice was more powerful, more sure, more didactic than Pedro's. I will teach you how to heal the hearts of men. You will understand. Love one another. We could both feel the force of these words as they were impressed into our being. The words were alive. We could never forget them. Later, Pedro told me that he vividly saw and heard everything that this luminous visitor communicated, words that danced with light as they bridged the space between them. I had heard the same words. I was sure they were also meant for me. Important lessons leapt at me. Reach out with love and compassion, and do not worry so much about outcomes. Do not attempt to end your life before its natural time. A higher wisdom deals with outcomes and knows the time for all things. Free will and destiny coexist. Do not measure healing by physical results. Healing occurs at many levels, not just the physical, and real healing must occur at the heart level. Somehow I would learn about healing the hearts of men. Most of all, love one another. Timeless wisdom, easily grasped but practiced by only a few. My mind drifted back to Pedro. Themes of separation and loss plagued his lifetimes. This time they had led him to suicide. He had been warned about not ending a life prematurely. But losses were occurring anew, and grief had returned. Would he remember, or would hopeless despair overtake him once again? How devastating it is to be a healer who cannot heal his patient. Elizabeth's failure in Ancient Egypt. Pedro's despair as Thomas, the Ohio physician. My own painful experiences as a healer. My first frustration as a healer who could not stop the onslaught of a rampaging illness occurred more than 25 years ago during my very first clinical rotation as a third-year student at Yale Medical School. I began with pediatrics, and I was assigned to Danny, a 7-year-old boy with a large Wilms tumor. This is a malignant tumor of the kidney that occurs almost exclusively in childhood. The younger the child, the better the prognosis. 7 was not considered young for this cancer. Danny was the first real patient in my medical career. Prior to him, all of my experience had been in classrooms, lecture halls, laboratories, and sitting for endless hours in front of my textbooks. The third year began our clinical experience. We were assigned to hospital wards with real patients. Enough facts and theory. The time for practical application had arrived. I had to draw Danny's blood for the laboratory tests, and I took care of all the minor procedures, called scut work, by more advanced practitioners but very meaningful to third-year medical students. Danny was a wonderful child, but our bond was even stronger and more special because he was my first patient. Danny fought heroically. He had lost his hair from the powerful but toxic chemotherapy treatments. His belly was severely bloated. Yet he was rallying, and his parents and I took hope. A good percentage of children were able to recover from this type of malignancy at that time. I was the youngest member of the treatment team. The medical student usually knew less clinical medicine than the intern, resident, or attending physician, all of whom were incredibly busy with their work. On the other hand, the medical student had more time to spend with the patient and family. In general, the medical student also placed a higher priority on getting to know the patient and his family. We would customarily be assigned to talk to the family or to convey messages to the patient. Danny was my main patient, and I liked him a lot. I spent many hours sitting on the side of his bed, playing games, reading stories, or just talking. I admired his courage. I also spent time with his parents, frequently in Danny's dark and drab hospital room. We even ate together in the cafeteria. They were frightened but also encouraged by his rally. Suddenly, Danny took a drastic turn for the worse. A dangerous respiratory infection overwhelmed his weakened immune system. He had difficulty breathing, and his usually bright eyes turned dull and glazed. I was shunted aside by the more senior members of the medical team. Antibiotics were started and stopped and changed, to no avail. Danny slid downhill. I stayed with his mother and father, feeling helpless and horrified. The illness won. Danny died. I was too upset to spend more time with his parents, beyond a brief word and a hug. I identified with their pain as much as I could at that time. 3 years later, when my own son died in a hospital, I understood even more. But at the time, I felt some vague responsibility for his death, as if I should have done something, anything, to avert it. The failure to heal strikes at the very soul of every healer. I understood Thomas's despair. Far fewer psychiatric patients die of their illnesses. Yet the inability to help a severely disturbed patient evokes chords of the same frustration and sense of helplessness. When I was chairman of the psychiatry department at Mount Sinai, I treated a beautiful and talented woman in her 30s. A successful career woman, she had recently entered into a happy marriage. Gradually she became paranoid, and the paranoia was worsening despite medicines, despite therapy, despite every intervention. Neither I nor any consultant I called in could determine why, because her course and symptoms and tests were very atypical for schizophrenia, mania, or any other of the usual psychoses. She had begun to deteriorate soon after a trip to the Far East, and one test showed extremely high antibodies to a parasite. Still, no medical or psychiatric treatment helped, and she gradually worsened. Again, I had felt the pangs of helplessness, the frustration of the healer who could not heal. To reach out with love, to do your best and not be so concerned with results or outcomes, that is the answer. This simpler concept, ringing so true to me, is the balm of understanding that healers need. In a sense, I had reached out with love to Danny, and he had reached back to me. Soulmate, this is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.